The human brain, the most mysterious place in the universe. Prepare yourself for a mind-bending journey to the very edge of sanity, to a surreal realm where the barrier between consciousness and chaos breaks down. I'm neuropsychiatrist Dr. Reef Karim, taking you on an exploration of extreme human behavior. In this episode, a man's nightmares begin intruding into his waking life until he is trapped in a terrifying dream world. Then,
I'm 39.
A woman loses 23 years of her life over the course of a nap. And a man with a compulsion to control everything in his environment can no longer control the behavior of his own hand. You are about to witness shocking abnormalities of the human brain. This is Broken Minds. Envision a man tortured by his own vivid nightmares, especially when they begin to spill into his waking life. Trapped in a nighttime fantasy world from which he can't wake up, Todd B is a victim of his own broken mind. From the case files of neurologist Dr. Jeffrey Aguirre, this is the true account of a man whose nightmares will not stay confined to his sleep and will soon leave him questioning what's real and what's not.
This is the story of Todd B., a game designer. He had developed some troubles with his sleeping. Todd had become violent and was kicking and punching his wife. An important feature of sleep is that at points during the night, we're naturally paralyzed, and that paralysis stops us from moving around during dream sleep. Todd, instead of having that normal paralysis, he would actually act as if his dreams were happening to him and he was able to move. This was a problem that had started slowly in stages, but had gotten steadily worse over the course of about 2 years.
What started in bed soon escalates to nightmares during the day.
Something strange had happened to Todd. As time had gone on, Todd started to see things. Today! He couldn't distinguish what was real from what was a hallucination.
What is it?
There's snakes in the drawer.
Deeply disturbed that his nightmares are creeping into his waking life and concerned his marriage is falling apart, Todd B. desperately seeks the help of neurologist Dr. Jeffrey Aguirre.
Jenny's gone out to the guest room.
I'm a behavioral neurologist. The work I do involves seeing patients who have a variety of problems. It's worth considering when you're faced with a case that is unusual or you have trouble figuring it out, which parts of the story to believe and which parts not to. And sometimes in the retelling of symptoms or accounting some of the fine details of things that have happened to people, some symptoms can be exaggerated or some symptoms can be changed or added. But I really believe Todd. I believe Todd both for the things he was seeing and for the things that were happening to him. He sure wasn't faking punching his wife at night. This was something that had caused a real problem for them. His wife had moved into another room and produced a lot of stress in their marriage. Neither of them wanted to have this problem where he would move and kick and punch at night. They wanted to be back in the same bed together. He wasn't making that up. I also really believed him about his visual hallucinations and illusions. He was really hesitant to tell me about this stuff. So Todd was worried that these visual illusions were a sign that he was going crazy, and I had to work a little bit to kind of pull out the details of what it was that he was seeing. So I believed him.
During the daytime, how do you feel?
The office.
Despite these problems with his sleep at home, Todd had been able to keep working. Although he tended to have good days and bad days, he'd found that he was a little unsteady with walking, that he dragged his feet just a little bit. On this one particular day, Todd's problems with balance turned up as a bigger problem. The last thing Todd remembers is standing up. The next thing he knows, he's on the ground.
Todd, can you hear me? You're right, man. Can you hear me?
Nobody actually saw what happened to Todd at that moment. All he knows is that he's on the ground now, and his coworkers are gathered around him.
Should I get
How many fingers am I?
In the days after his fall, Todd's vision started to change, and it started to change in a characteristic way.
Just know that you're not the only guy who's working late on a Friday night.
Talk to yourself much these days, Todd?
No?
There's no one there.
Then who's that?
Your shadow?
He knew that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He was finding that increasingly disturbing. Todd went to see an optometrist who did a routine examination and checked out a few things and found glaucoma. It is a possibility. There is a way that eye disease can produce these sorts of visual hallucinations.
Todd begins taking prescription eye drops with the hope he can eliminate his bizarre visions.
Despite the glaucoma being treated in this way, the visions continue. I had never seen a case like this, where someone had developed these changes in their vision so quickly. These hallucinations were growing worse.
With glaucoma no longer accounting for his unexplained visions, Todd fears he's losing his grip on reality.
I'm certain there was somebody there.
These visual illusions had moved from something that they could explain as his eyes just not seeing things properly in dim light to really frank visual hallucinations where he was seeing people who weren't there, and they wanted answers. They wanted to try and figure out what was at the bottom of all this.
Dr. Aguirre knows that Todd's hallucinations could be caused by any number of strange abnormalities in the brain, such as schizophrenia or stroke. With his patient's frightening condition progressing so quickly, if he doesn't find an answer soon, his patient may be beyond help.
It's possible to have a dementing illness like Alzheimer's disease,
Have you noticed any changes in your memory?
No.
but Alzheimer's disease wouldn't really be a good explanation. His memory seemed fine.
What I'd like you to do you own a video camera?
One thing we considered for Todd early on was seizures. Seizures can cause you to move around at night. Seizures can also cause you to lose consciousness and fall. And finally, seizures rarely can cause you to have visual illusions and hallucinations. The way we looked into the possibility of seizures was to do two things. We obtained an EEG study, which is a measure of the electrical activity of the brain. The other thing we did was we obtained an MRI scan, a high-resolution picture of the back of the brain. Both those tests came back completely normal. All the structures of the brain that are responsible for vision were there and intact. This case had the unusual feature that it was difficult to put into any one basket. Like any good detective story, there's always some bits of clues or little pieces of information that don't end up fitting in just right.
And so I go up the stairs.
You'll come up with an answer and it seems to fit almost everything.
I blacked out for, they told me, a few seconds.
But there's always one little piece that doesn't quite fit in at the end.
This horrible bump on the back of his head.
There are unsolved mysteries in neurology all the time.
As Dr. Aguirre struggles to find a diagnosis, Todd's daytime nightmares turn his workplace into a terrifying dreamscape.
It's not just going to be some sort of random character that somebody drew that's going to be the character that you're playing this game for. Some different stages of the level, you know, we have some different weapons and...
These visual illusions, the tendency to see things that weren't there, this was becoming more of a problem and more threatening. He was uncertain what was real and what was not real.
Todd?
He was uncertain from moment to moment where he was or what he could believe and what he couldn't believe.
Todd, take it easy, man.
Stay calm, stay calm.
Hey,
Where is it? Where is it?
Hey, Todd, look at me. It's okay.
Where is it?
And responded to all this with increasing agitation and violence and anger.
Todd can no longer distinguish reality from his nightmares. The breaking point comes when his wife Jenny finds their house destroyed.
And this was the final straw for Jenny. She just couldn't take it anymore.
What's wrong? What happened here? What? What?
And on one occasion, it got so bad they had to call an ambulance.
What started out as vivid nightmares now seems to be a rapid descent into madness. If Dr. Aguirre can't come up with a diagnosis or treatment, Todd may never escape the disturbing dream world he inhabits. He may forever be locked inside his own broken mind. Heart rate 120, blood pressure 160, 110.
Todd's case had taken a turn for the worse. He couldn't really distinguish what was real from what was a hallucination. His behavior became so erratic, he was so upset and so confused that his wife had him brought to a local emergency department. The ER doctors responded the way they should, which is that when you find someone who's confused and combative and agitated, you treat them with a medication. It's antipsychotic, which can be used to calm people down, to reduce the hallucinations that they see, and to get them into a bit more of a cooperative state.
Todd?
When the doctors gave Todd a dose of this antipsychotic medication, he had a dramatic reaction. More than just calming down, Todd froze. He became immobile. His face became like a mask, and he sank back into the bed. He became nearly catatonic. This was a frightening turn of events for everyone involved. For the physicians and paramedics taking care of Todd, for his wife. She was worried that this might be the end.
莱昂纳多·达芬奇，创造力惊人的文艺复兴巨匠，科学大师、艺术大师、战争大师。他革命性的发明拥有无与伦比的破坏力。他们是当时最先进的武器，但还没有现存的证据证明他建造过它们。我们集结了一支4人建造团队，这些专家会将这个15世纪大师的草图付诸实践，用达芬奇时代的材料把它们建造出来。
我曾是海军陆战队士兵，我持有美术、计算机辅助设计与制造和五金的学位。我拥有一间机械人及机械动物特效公司，我懂得如何建造出复杂的机器。作为一名艺术工作者兼机械设计师，我能理解达芬奇的思维。
我一直都热爱机械工程，他们既有工具，又有才能。是时候来破解达芬奇的发明了。
Why was he having this severe response to the medication that they had given him just to calm him down? But for me, actually, this was the clue that answered the entire mystery of the case.
As Todd slowly comes out of his frozen state, Dr. Aguirre rushes to the hospital, finally ready to make a diagnosis.
Feel a little better?
Yeah, I think a little bit.
That kind of response is a characteristic feature of a disease called diffuse Lewy body disease. It's a disorder where over a period of months and years, there is the slow degeneration and death of neurons, which are located within the brainstem. Patients with diffuse Lewy body disease develop this tendency to move and to talk during their sleep. They have slowly begin to have troubles with their movement. People start off with misperceptions and then go on to have hallucinations. Diffuse Lewy body disease offered an explanation for everything that had come before. For reasons that we don't really fully understand, a lot of these neurodegenerative diseases look an awful lot worse in the months after someone's had a fall and struck their head. And that's probably what had happened in Todd's case.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to do just one more very simple test, if you feel like you can stand up.
Yeah.
That'd be okay?
I think so.
Okay, let's try that.
So I was fairly confident that diffuse Lewy body disease was the answer here, but, you know, a final little bit of evidence helped really seal the diagnosis. The test to do in that case is what's called a pull test. It couldn't be easier. All I had to do was get Todd up from the bed.
I'm just gonna gently tug on your shoulder and just try to keep your balance.
And then even with warning him, with telling him that I was gonna give him a pull,
Okay.
by tugging him back in the shoulders, he just fell backwards into my arms.
Let's put you back in bed. Let's put you back in bed.
Diffuse Lewy body disease had slowed the speed of his movements, the automatic changes of posture that we do to keep our balance all the time. And so for Todd, this small adjustment in his posture by pulling back on his shoulders, he was unable to compensate for. And so he just kept falling back like a tree falling down.
But that pretty much confirms it.
Like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, diffuse Lewy body disease is a form of dementia. While there is no cure for Todd's strange condition, there are medications that keep his vivid fantasies locked away in the dreams where they belong. By diagnosing his problem, Dr. Aguirre has assured that Todd can return to a fairly normal life, no longer trapped inside in nightmarish limbo.
We don't have a treatment for the fundamental problem. But the good news is we do have treatments for a lot of the symptoms.
I'm gonna give him some medication.
There's a medication that you can take just before you go to sleep that takes away all that violent moving at night.
There's some medication.
It's possible to treat the hallucinations. We have medications that can be used to control that agitation and to reduce the degree to which people have visual hallucinations.
Deal with
The third piece of news is that there are medications that can be used to slow down the disease a little bit.
Talk to you soon.
Of all things, the ability to get them back into bed together was really the best thing I could have done for them. You know, there's different kinds of cases. Sometimes a patient will walk into your office, and just from the way they walk across the room, you know what the diagnosis is going to be. For other cases, even after months and years of following someone, you still might not be perfectly certain about what the answer is. What we know about the brain is vastly overshadowed by what we still have to learn.
Now, the bizarre case of Judy J., a woman who wakes up from a nap and finds herself living in an alternate reality. Renowned neuropsychologist Dr. Paul Brox recounts the true story of his most memorable patient.
Judy went out shopping. She hadn't been feeling particularly well. She was feeling unusually tired when she got home and just wanted to, you know, crash out and have a drink and listen to some music. You know, that was her routine. So she'd pour herself a martini. She relaxed in her favorite leather armchair. Is approached by her little daughter who wants a bedtime story, but she feels a bit tired for that, so she lets her husband, Andy, take charge. And she just relaxes and falls asleep. Judy wakes slowly from her nap. She's feeling nauseous. She has a terrible headache. It's dusk, evening starting to fall, and there's just enough light coming in through the window to show there's something wrong here. There were strange things about the place that she was in. It seemed unfamiliar to her, not the place that she imagined she would wake up in. The TV set was sleeker and blacker. She has this habit of playing with her wedding ring when she's anxious. Ring's not there. Then a strange man walks into the room, middle-aged man with grey hair. She has no idea who this man is.
Hey, Jude. Thought you were still asleep.
This man starts to talk to her, uses her name, seems very familiar with her, even though she's not familiar with him.
Stop! Don't come any closer.
Then she says, well, where's Andy? Where's my husband?
What are you talking about?
She's pretty panicky.
Hi, it's me, Roger. You and Andy have been divorced for years.
What?
claims that he's her partner of 19 years. He's very calm, he's very reassuring.
Do you know where you are?
At this point, Judy's giving strange information. She'd given a pretty robust defense of who she thought she was, or the circumstances she thought she was really in. Married to Andy with a small child, a little girl.
I'm your husband.
And is told by this man that Andy was ancient history.
What?
And he realizes there's a problem.
Judy, do you know how old you are?
I'm 39.
Darling, you're 62.
She's this woman who's 62 years old, and she believes that she's this 39-year-old person. Pretty striking. Quite often you'd be presented with cases which were simply a puzzle. They were mysterious.
Emily!
Emily?
He sends for her daughter.
What happened? What's wrong? Mom, are you okay? What's going on?
And how strange it must be to have someone call you Mum and you have no idea who they are.
What's going on?
I don't think anybody really understood at that point quite what was happening.
I'll get you some water.
The daughter and her partner were trying to reassure her that she was in a safe place.
Mom, you all right?
Their actual efforts to reassure were in some ways having the opposite effect. They were just kind of reinforcing the strangeness of the situation. Finally, she says, well, if I'm 62 years old, then I'm an old woman. Where's the mirror? Show me a mirror. She looks at the mirror, and sure enough, she's not this 39-year-old woman, she's a 62-year-old woman. This woman lost 23 years of her life over the course of a nap.
An abandoned ship weighing nearly 1,800 tons.
Come on inside.
Can a team sail this decaying wreck over 1,600 miles to the Caribbean and then sink her to the seabed to create an artificial reef? The teams must battle heavy metal.
I'm not a happy man. I'm a stressed man.
And ferocious storms.
Weather's going bad offshore here.
Periods of snow will cause travel difficulties.
One huge ship, one team with a mission to sink it. A titanic task that will test the nerves of the people who dare to do monster moves.
Let's think about this in terms of what happens when we ordinarily wake up. There's a moment of disorientation where we may not be quite sure where we are. We're not quite sure who we are, in a sense, and the brain does its work, and it very rapidly thinks, this is who I am, this is where I am, this is what I'm doing. So imagine if you wake up from sleep and those things don't fall into place. You have a sense of who you are, you have a sense of where you are, but you look around and it's not what you imagined. It's a Rip Van Winkle story, for real. So she's in a very agitated and disturbed state. Judy tries to stand. It's too much. She passes out. When she wakes up, she's in a hospital. Her strange man, the grey-haired man, is with her. She still has no idea who he is.
Hi, Mom.
Her daughter, no idea. These are all strangers.
Judy's unusual case is referred to world-renowned neuropsychologist Dr. Paul Brox.
Hello, I'm Dr. Brox.
On the first meeting, she was disturbed at a pretty deep level with, what had happened.
Can you tell me what your name is?
Judy.
There's a kind of a checklist of questions which focus on orientation for time, place, who are you, how old are you?
Judy, do you know who the president is?
Ronald Reagan.
As she went through those questions, the response to that, all wrong, but wrong in a consistent fashion.
What's yours?
Judy retained a sense of identity. She knew she was Judy within a different time frame. What's unusual about this case is that someone would lose such a compartmentalized period of their life that affects not only their personal experiences, but also general knowledge of the world over that period. And that it should have such a clear starting point and end point.
Can you raise your right hand?
That goes against what we know about how the memory system works. We simply don't fall asleep for 23 years. It's amnesia. But I've never come across a similar case.
Amnesia is, quite simply, a condition where a person cannot recall some or all of the memories their brain has stored. It's typical for the onset to be abrupt. But what's unusual about Judy's case is the large and specific period of time that has disappeared and left her facing an unfamiliar world. Dr. Brox is determined to solve the mystery of Judy's broken mind.
We looked into the physical symptoms. She had been suffering from coronary heart disease and been receiving treatments for that. Thinking about, with my Sherlock Holmes hat on and my Sherlock Holmes pipe, you think, well, what are the possible factors here? Because it's so unusual, you have to cast your hypothetical net very, very wide. She had been living a fairly normal life, no major stresses, no major traumas. She didn't show anything like the pattern that one would expect with Alzheimer's or with any other form of dementia. Head injury, viral infection of the brain, herpes simplex, encephalitis, carbon monoxide poisoning, severe alcohol abuse. The more we ruled out, the more baffling this case became. I'd never come across anything quite like that. But there is another possibility. She had a history of coronary heart disease. There is a link between that and susceptibility to stroke. So she had CT scan, MRI, EEG, and there was evidence of lesions in the right hemisphere of the brain.
It looks like a stroke.
A stroke occurs when blood flow to any part of the brain stops. When this happened to Judy during her nap, it caused brain cells to die, wiping away 2 decades of her memories.
A single stroke can be responsible for huge damage.
That's us, look. You recognize yourself, right?
So there's nothing odd about the idea that someone can have a stroke and be left with massive cognitive and emotional impairments. But it wasn't a huge stroke.
So that's why I'm a little bit confused about the amnesia.
As far as I'm concerned, the stroke wasn't sufficient to account for the overall picture of the profound, very dramatic, very dense amnesia that she presented with. So there's something very strange going on here.
You're doing a good job, Judy.
The assumption would have been that as she recovered from the stroke, that there'd have been some recovery of memory function as well.
Maybe make it around the whole wing today, huh?
But that didn't happen.
Who are you?
Judy, I'm Raj.
No.
She was still in a state of resigned confusion.
Where am I?
Judy, listen to me.
She was certainly disturbed at a pretty deep level with what had happened.
Where's Andy?
It's all right. Let's walk back to the room.
Andy. Oh, sweetie.
It's Roger.
We can lose vision and we're still the person we think we are. We can lose hearing, we're still the person we think we are. But there are certain aspects of mental life that if we lose, then the self is really challenged.
一场狂烈的冰雹击裂了驾驶舱的挡风玻璃，破坏了飞机的引擎。
看起来好像被锤子敲过一样。
一股强烈的向下气流将一架160吨重的飞机刮到了车来车往的公路上。
我看到一架飞机这样飞过来，我知道这很不对劲。
一股迅猛的顺风将一架空客吹到一条湿滑的跑道上。
当时你可以感觉到自己几乎就要被抛离座位了。
狂烈的雷暴也同样会引发空中灾难。
我心想：天哪，我从来没见过这样的事情。
目击者和生还者讲述惊心动魄的故事，逼真的动画让你置身机舱中，近距离观察飞机是如何对抗天气的。
《
After suffering a stroke while napping, 62-year-old Judy awakens to find her mind confined to the world she knew at age 39. She can't remember a single day from the last 23 years of her life. Neuropsychologist Dr. Paul Brox knows that Judy has amnesia, but has no answers as to how to return her to the life she knew.
To lose a whole chunk of 23 years wholesale, that's incredibly difficult to come to terms with. It must be surreal and frightening to move through a world unfamiliar to you, populated by people you don't know, and situations you don't recognize. Almost like a parallel universe.
During the days ahead, Judy recovers from the trauma of her stroke and eventually comes to accept the new reality of her 62-year-old self.
Well, will I get my memory back?
I'll be honest, Judy, I don't know.
Judy was looking forward rather than backwards.
That's from last year.
Very often there are so-called implicit memories of circumstances and events and learning experiences. For example, if you lose memory for faces and you're then shown pictures of familiar faces and pictures of strange faces, you may not be able to consciously distinguish between the two, but at an emotional level, what you find is there is a different response to the familiar faces.
Remember her, Mom?
Yeah.
So what's remarkable is that she, after that period of confusion, began to make reconnections. She, over time, did regain patches of memory.
Maybe we should give your mom some rest.
Okay. I'll see you later.
We, in a sense, define ourselves by our stories. In a literal sense, it's the story of who we are. It's surprising how quickly people can rewrite that and get on with their life. Even in such a remarkable and rare case as Judy. In my experience, she's a one-off. A real mystery. In this century, I think we're going to face some of the big philosophical questions about what it means to be a person, what consciousness is. And I think neuroscience will take us a long way to understanding those questions. But maybe it won't take us all the way. And maybe there'll always be that element of mystery. I'm quite happy with that kind of uncertainty. Mystery drives knowledge. I mean, without uncertainty, there would be no science. It'd be terribly boring if we knew the answers to everything.
Imagine the torture of a man who desires nothing more than complete control over his environment, who then loses control over his own hand. From the case files of psychiatrist Hani Kuzam, the disturbing true story of Hector V, locked in a body controlled by a broken mind.
Hector was a 35 years old Hispanic gentleman who was suffering from severe obsessive compulsive disorder with cleanliness and symmetry. He used to work in a market, but his obsessive compulsive disorder came into the way of performing these duties. He spent hours arranging cans of goods. He has to make sure they are all clean. That consumed tremendous amount of time, and arranging them doesn't make them get sold faster. One day, he saw an elderly man who was wearing a blue jacket, and Hector noticed that there were some fluff on that jacket. He jumped to clean that fluff, and the elderly man fell to the ground.
What the hell?
No, I'm so sorry. That was the stroke that broke the camel back. He was fired from the market.
Unable to hold down a job, Hector desperately seeks the help of distinguished psychiatrist Hani Kuzam.
When he came to see me, Hector talked that there is no hope in his life.
I can't keep doing this.
He said, I do things over and over again. I know it's not rational, it doesn't make sense. So I must be losing my mind.
When I was a kid, I used to count beads.
And then I'd get my toy cars and I'd line them up perfectly.
The way he was dressed, he was very meticulous. His shoes were very shiny. His nails are cut. You can see under nail, very clean. I realized he has obsessive compulsive disorder that has gone untreated.
Are you familiar with OCD? No.
So I explained to him this condition. I clarified to him this is a real psychiatric condition. And I told him there is a treatment.
We have a drug you can take that cuts down your impulse to do this.
Lots of medication that we use now are very effective in decreasing the intensity of the obsession. It may not eliminate all of his obsessive compulsive, but he will be able really to be freed from this burden.
In addition to medication, Dr. Kuzam also recommends regular therapy sessions to treat obsessive-compulsive disorder. But Hector fails to show up for his appointments.
His obsession and compulsion decreased dramatically. He was able to stop himself from going over and over the tasks. He found a job in a car wash that does details. His obsessive-compulsive disorder actually helped him perform well in this job. There was no restriction on how much cleaning he does. They found him as an exceptional worker. But then he stopped taking his medication because it was causing him to be sleepy and groggy. That was a horrifying mistake. His obsessive-compulsive disorder came full-blown.
What are you doing?
He will go over spots over and over. There is worsening of depression. That made his obsessive-compulsive anxiety worse, to the point that one day he was preoccupied. He didn't pay attention while cleaning this fluff from his jacket. So he didn't see when the light turned red. He was hospitalized in the ICU for several days because he had a severe head injury and he went into a coma. He had a blood clot in his brain. Miraculously, the blood clot was treated successfully. But then when he recovered from the treatment, he noticed that his left hand was acting in a very strange manner. It will do things that he cannot control. He tried to button his shirt with his right hand, and the left hand come and unbutton the shirt. Even when the doctor come, they try to listen to his heart.
Hey, Hector, what are you doing?
The left hand will pull the stethoscope from the doctor.
Sorry.
A person with obsessive-compulsive disorder like to control everything. He survived the accident, he did not die, he's not paralyzed, but now he has something he has no control over. That was totally devastating for him. When he was doing the car wash, his left hand is totally chaotic. It took a hose and hit his left eyebrow very hard, that the hose hurt his left eyebrow.
You all right? What happened? Just grab my hand. You all right?
In his home is doing everything against what he likes to do. Whenever he want to read a newspaper, the left hand will close the newspaper. He couldn't do his bed. He couldn't cook. He couldn't function at all.
Hector's orderly world has devolved into chaos. His left hand is tormenting him, and there's nothing he can do to stop it.
He had a younger brother that he was very close to, who agreed to come take care of him.
Hector, what happened?
the apartment was in total disarray.
Hector, it's gonna be okay.
His brother thought this is a worsening of his OCD. He said, let's go to the doctor that treated you for obsessive compulsive disorder.
Hector.
I was so surprised. He's not the Hector that I saw the first time. He didn't have a star shirt. His nails were long. His hair was calm.
So how are you, Hector?
I can't control my left hand. It just undoes everything I do.
See if you can do this.
So why is he having this problem with his left hand? Something in the brain is causing this left hand to act this way.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Some cases of obsessive compulsive disorder are related to one part of the body. The most severe cases is what we call Tourette syndrome. It is associated with body tics, but it is also associated with guttering sound, where people utter obscenity out of control. He didn't have these conditions. So if there is something wrong with the left hand, you want to think about movement disorder, like Parkinson's disease. You also want to think about vitamin deficiency. His history did not suggest any of these conditions. So I asked him, is something happened to this left hand? And he told me the whole story, what happened to him.
Let me do some research on this. Give me a couple days. I'll get back to you.
Since Hector's left hand began plaguing him after his head injury, Dr. Kuzam contacts the hospital that treated him, searching for clues.
Thank you.
I asked them, do they have brain imaging of where did the blood clot occur? I was able to obtain them on the computer. The blood clot occurred in an area in the brain called the corpus callosum.
The corpus callosum is a bundle of nerves in the center of the brain, responsible for facilitating communication between the left and right hemispheres.
So that was the light bulb coming up. Because he had the clot in that area, it affected the connection between the two parts of the brain.
The left side of the body is controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain, and vice versa. And since the corpus callosum is responsible for communication between the hemispheres, damage to it has caused a condition where Hector's right brain doesn't know what his left hand is doing. This specific condition has nothing to do with Hector's OCD, except that his obsession with order has now found its perfect torment.
So his left hand was working on its own. This is a condition that we called alien hand syndrome. It's a very rare condition. There is no treatment for it.
Dr. Hani Kuzam has just diagnosed his patient Hector V with an extremely rare condition called alien hand syndrome, where one part of the body takes on a mind of its own.
I believe I know what is causing your left hand to act up.
I told him, you have a condition called alien hand syndrome.
Take a look at your brain scan.
So I described to him how the brain works and the area of the corpus callosum.
Now, see this dark area here? That was a blood clot was removed. When the clot was removed, damage was done to your corpus callosum.
Is there a cure?
I told him we don't know how to treat it, but there are some way to control that hand.
I have made a list here for different things you can try.
Because alien hand syndrome is so extremely rare, little time has been devoted to researching a cure. However, we do know that we can diminish and to some degree manage the symptoms by keeping the rogue hand occupied with simple tasks.
Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
I suggest if he walks with a cane, the grasp on the cane may prevent this left hand from dropping the cane.
Here, Hector, let go.
The cane doesn't work. One of the recommendations I read is to put it in a sling, so it loses its momentum and energy. He didn't like this because walking with a sling doesn't go well with his image about himself.
I can't wear the sling.
He likes neatness, organization, symmetry. Every person is created in a unique way. We have to consider, we are treating Hector who have OCD, Hector who have alien hand syndrome. We have to consider who is Hector.
Hector.
One of his obsession at a younger age was to count beads.
Why don't you try counting with your left hand like you did when you were young?
So he decided to fill his left pocket with beads so that he can occupy his left hand. He went back to the car wash. Even after he developed the alien hand, they did not fire him. They said that he is more accurate than the buffing machine they have. He said the counting of the beads has been very effective. Lots of the brain is still a mystery to us. I feel that although there is no cure for alien hand, I conveyed the message that there is hope. Let's not close the chapter on hope, on any condition.
An errant hand, a forgotten life, and a waking nightmare. Clearly, the power of the brain to create what we consider normal is matched only by its ability to reshape reality as we know it. Sometimes the results can be confusing, other times terrifying. But in the end, the one truth that remains constant is that there's nothing more mysterious than the human mind.